The sun hasn't risen in 3 years. It started with longer twilights, then a slow dimming, barely noticed at first, like a bruise darkening beneath the skin of the sky. Scientists scrambled for answers, as they always do: atmospheric ash, volcanic activity, even solar anomalies. But their signals went quiet, one by one, until there was no one left to explain why the day had simply stopped coming. Now the sky is locked in a murky kind of midnight, not the peaceful blue-black that once came with stargazing and porch lights, but something thicker, heavier, a permanent overcast, a low-hanging, oppressive shroud that seems to drink in light instead of reflecting it. Even at noon, if that word still means anything, you need a lantern to see your own hands. What's left of the world doesn't glow. It glimmers faintly like something half-dead, trying not to be forgotten. I'm broadcasting now from what used to be an AM radio tower outside of what used to be Chicago. Most of the city's underwater, now those great skyscrapers, once beacons of human ingenuity, now gutted spines rising out of the lake. The old shoreline's been swallowed. The buildings have rusted through or slouched into the muck. When the clouds part just enough, you can sometimes see the tip of the Willis Tower like a gravestone in the fog. The flooding came before the dark, when the polar ice caps collapsed in a final, silent surrender. The seas rushed in, not in a cinematic wave, but inch by inch, relentless. As the water advanced, people moved inland, what little land was left that wasn't scorched or starved by drought. The government drew up red zones, blue zones, safe zones. Then came the riots. Then came the silence. What remains now isn't government. It's clusters, compounds, cults, if you're feeling uncharitable. No more states or nations, just fortified communities with ration codes and rotating shifts on watch duty. Electricity, when you can find it, comes from old bicycle dynamos or salvaged panels that soak up the faintest scraps of UV. It's not enough to power heaters or lights, just radios like this one. And that, friends, is why I'm still talking. The dark changed people. It scraped the corners of their minds raw. We weren't made for this kind of midnight. Circadian rhythms unravel like wet thread. Crops failed almost immediately, confused by the lack of light. Entire food systems collapsed. The megafarms in the Midwest became wind-blown graveyards for genetically modified corn. The soil turned sour. The rain, when it comes, as heavy with toxins and metal flavored. Some folks call it bone rain. That's not poetic. That's because it leaches calcium from whatever it touches. I've seen the aftermath. Livestock turned skeletal in days. Wildfires still happen, somehow fueled by methane pockets and dry lightning tearing through forests that never see the sun. The firestorms glow behind the horizon like false dawns, cruel reminders of the light we used to have. Some people chase them just to feel warmth. Most don't come back. And then there's the cold. It's not polar, not Antarctic. It's stranger. An eerie chill that seeps into the bone no matter how many layers you wear. The sun was never just light. It was rhythm, energy, life. Without it, time collapsed. People stopped counting days. Watches became useless. Clocks still tick, but no one trusts them. Sometimes, I think the only calendar left is the human body. How long since your last full meal, your last clean drink, your last dream that didn't end in frostbite or fire. These are the new units of time, and they're dwindling. Rogue groups, call them what you like, have adapted faster than most. Raiders, scavvers, shadows. They don't waste time with ethics. They move in silence, drawn to signal and movement. You can tell when they've been near canned food missing, empty campfire pits, the distinct smell of old gasoline and blood. They wear light-blocking goggles, not to protect against brightness, but to pierce the endless dark with infrared scraps. There's rumor some of them eat people. I don't know if it's true. I haven't been desperate enough to ask. Cities are husks, forests are cemeteries, roads are rivers now, or veins of cracked asphalt that lead to nowhere and promise even less. The sky, when not sealed in cloud, is an eerie void. No stars, no moon, just a dull cosmic bruise. But there are still voices, crackling, distorted, intermittent, but voices, like mine, like yours, if you're out there. Sometimes I catch fragments on the shortwave bands. A woman in Quebec reading poetry into the dark. A child's laughter buried under static from somewhere south. A signal that just repeats coordinates northwest Montana, always the same. Like a heartbeat, it's not much, but it's something. And in this long night, something still matters. My name is Raven Cross, or at least it was. Once, back then, names meant lineage, history, promise. Now they're just signposts in the static, meaning as fleeting as daylight. I'm the one you hear on this frequency, barely audible at times, but trying to cut through the endless dark. I'm your voice in this void. I wasn't always a broadcaster. I was a climatologist, one of the thousands of hopeful scientists who believed we could adapt, maybe even reverse the damage. I spent years studying ice cores, atmospheric samples, soil acidity. I wrote papers, attended conferences. I chased grant money and peer-reviewed accolades. I thought knowledge could save us. Then the world dimmed when the first whispers of perpetual night began. I was in Greenland, drilling into layers of millennia. The ice gave up its secret sulfur deposits from volcanic eruptions, traces of wildfires centuries old, but no explanation for the skies, knew Paul. By the time I flew home, white-knuckled in a cargo plane bound for Chicago, the storms had already drowned the city's southern half. I landed in twilight. By landing, I mean I was rerouted to what was left of Milwaukee, then bussed inland through checkpoints guarded by terrified soldiers. The last military outpost collapsed weeks later. I never heard from those officers again. I still carry my field kit wherever I go. Battered Geiger counter, makeshift spectrometer, handful of nutrient strips I stole from a deserted research station. I use them to test soil samples samplesily to find pockets of moss, more often to confirm that every inch of earth around me is dead or dying. The data doesn't help me sleep, but it keeps me human. It reminds me I'm not entirely adrift, even if the rest of the world feels that way. Survival is a series of rituals. Every dawn by which I mean the first faint glow behind the cloud's eye start my generator. It's a pedal-powered contraption, modified over months with bicycle gears and bicycle spokes welded to an old car alternator. My legs pump until the battery reaches a whisper of charge, enough to power this transmitter long enough for one broadcast. Sometimes I pray the wiring holds. Most of the time, I just grit my teeth and pedal until the lights flicker on. Then I check my supplies. Collected from an underground cistern I discovered beneath an abandoned church. It tastes of mildew and rust, but it's life. I filter each drop-through charcoal from burned driftwood and scraps of coffee filters I salvaged months ago. My larder consists of dried lichen, laughably optimistic, and a handful of protein bars traded from a traveling caravan last spring. I allot one meal per broadcast cycle, a canister of ethanol distilled from spoiled fruit, enough for 5 days of heat when the nights plunge below freezing. I know every ration intimately. There's no luxury of waste. What drives me on, day after endless day? It's not heroism. It's not even hope, exactly. It's the responsibility of the voice. I have a mic. Others still listen. Maybe they tune in out of habit. Maybe out of desperation, but they listen. Somewhere, someone is falling asleep to my words. Somewhere, someone hears that crackle and thinks, I'm not alone. I lost nearly everything when the floods came. My family home outside Minneapolis, the lab where I analyzed snowpack samples, my partner's violin case, rusted hollow in the rising water. I lost the people I loved. My sister drowned, trying to reach high ground. My partner died of exposure when our generator failed on a sub-zero night. I carry their names in my throat like stones, but I speak anyway. Because if I stop, their memories vanish into the void. Loneliness is the constant companion of this world. Even when I encounter other survivors, once a small enclave in northern Wisconsin with solar panels patched together from stadium lighting. Another time, a group of hunters camped near the Mississippi's new shores. They disappear or scatter under the pressure of resources. People move on, and sometimes I can't blame them. Trust is as rare as daylight. Raiders once hunted me. Drawn by the glow of my pedal lights, I slipped away under the cloak of frost and fractured wetlands. But I still bear the scars, both physical and mental. Yet there are moments that pull me back from the brink. A postcard I found in the church cisterna, child's drawing of a sunny playground. Crayons smudged reminds me what we lost. A message scrawled on a cave wall by an anonymous traveler. Don't give up. Keep moving north. Someone out there still believed in tomorrow. I took that to heart. The next week, I rode my makeshift bike across broken bridges, fording chest-deep water to deliver a message on a homemade flyer directions to the cistern for anyone searching. A couple of souls showed up days later, gaunt and wary, but relieved. We shared water and stories. For a breath, I felt whole. I record my broadcasts in what used to be a basement 2 floors below a looted library. Its shelves toppled, books waterlogged beyond recognition. I rigged insulation from shredded curtains and foam panels salvaged from a hospital wing. The air is stale, but the walls keep most of the wind-driven grime out. My equipment is the skeleton of something that once served a regional station, an aging mixing board, a set of mismatched microphones, and coils of antenna wire wrapped around support beams. This equipment used to bring music and news. Now it carries my voice through the endless black, hoping to reach whoever remains. I close my eyes and let the static wash over me. I remember voices I loved, my sister's laugh in the kitchen, my partner's humming along to unplayed songs. My heart aches so fiercely I think it might fracture. But I breathe and I count my next ration. I remind myself the world is quieter now, but it's not silent. There are still footsteps on broken roads. There are still signals waiting to be heard. I survive on routine and purpose. Routine keeps madness at bay. Purpose is the spark that drives me forward. If I ever lose the pedal generator, the cistern map, or the will to speak, I will vanish like so many others. And that, more than cold or hunger or fear, is the one thing I cannot permit. Because as long as this station is alive, even if it's just me talking into the gloom, there's a chance that someone, somewhere, will answer back. My losses are many. The laughter of children, the warmth of sunshine, the simple promise of another day. But my resolve remains. I carry hope like a flickering filament in the dark fragile, yes, but still aglow. And in this eternal nightfall, I will keep pedaling, keep speaking, keep waiting for the dawn that may never come, because to stop would mean surrendering not only to the darkness outside, but to the darkness within. So here I am, Ravencross, climatologist, survivor, voice in the static, and as long as I can breathe, I will keep broadcasting. Not because I expect rescue, but because in telling this story, my story, we remind ourselves what it means to be alive. Even when the sun has forgotten us, we can still remember each other. And that memory, however faint, is enough to keep us going. I've been monitoring the data since the night began. Every time I pedal up enough juice to power the spectrometer, I run a quick scan of ambient radiation, particulate density, and microclimate readings. The numbers never leave 3 years ago. Volcanic particulates and massive wildfires injected so much soot into the upper atmosphere that they formed a near-continuous stratospheric layer. Solar irradiance has plummeted to less than 5% of its pre-collapse levels, choking photosynthesis and plunging average surface temperatures by -8 degrees Celsius. We've lost the sun and with it, the fundamental engine of life. The persistent darkness isn't just psychological. It alters atmospheric pressure gradients and disrupts jet streams. Storm fronts no longer follow predictable paths. Instead, they merge into superstorms that circle the globe at low latitudes, dumping acid rain one minute and howling winds the next. In between these monsters, the air stagnates, carrying methane pockets released from thawing permafrost and poisoned by the residue of scorched vegetation. One breath can produce a cough that steals your voice for hours. And right now, they're screaming that we're perched on the edge of a collapse within the collapse. Every day is a new trial. The cistern, once full, has dropped by a liter overnight. The lichen farms I tend in the basement yield half the biomass they did a year ago. The temperature dips below -20 degrees Celsius, come what we still call night. And without reliable heat, frostbite can set in within minutes. Raiders patrol less frequently these days, likely deterred by the unending chill, but the risk remains. One encounter can cost everything. My underground cistern holds roughly 200 Ella, reserve that with strict rationing 0.5 L per person. Per day should last 8 months for one person. But leaks are multiplying. The plastic sheeting patched over cracks doesn't hold forever. Half the samples I've tested show heavy metal contamination above. Rigged a charcoal's ceramic filter, but each filter set only purifies 5 L before clogging. Every liter beyond that carries the risk of kidney damage. Each broadcast, I share a primer on DIY filtration, charcoal from burned driftwood mixed with sand and gravel. Boil water for 10 minutes even in a dark world. I hammer home that heat kills pathogens, but without fuel, boiling is a luxury. My ethanol stash dwindles faster than I can pedal. Crop failures outnumber successful harvests 10 to 1. Lichen, mushrooms, and scavenged wild tubers keep me alive, but they pack almost no calories. I supplement with scavenged algae cartridges, salvaged from an experimental aquaponics set up once potent with omega-3 south, now little more than chalky flour. I calculate my basal metabolic rate against rationed intake. At 1,200 kcal per day, my body is at constant catabolism. Muscle mass gives way to bone. I feel the wear in every tendon. I broadcast foragers' tips. Look for luminescent fungi near old power stations where residual heat sparks metabolic anomalies. Use ultraviolet lead strips against cave walls to attract edible insects. Carry a pocket microscope to distinguish arsenic-tolerant weeds from lethal lookalikes. Yet every tip carries risk, both biological and social. Sharing knowledge can attract unwanted guests. My generator runs on ethanol distilled from foraged fructans, sometimes from mobile battery electrolytes. I test voltage output nightly. It hovers at 12 volts, plus or minus 0.5 volts, enough to drive the transmitter. Coil, but nothing more. A single overvoltage spike fries the circuit board. I live with jumper cables tangled around my shoulders like a stolen trophy. I've taught listeners to build pedal-powered alternators using bicycle back wheels and salvaged car belt pulleys. But the technical precision required minimize friction. Below 0.1 Nm, maintain rotor RPM at 300 to 350 means only someone with mechanical know-how can replicate it. Every few broadcasts, someone writes in with a schematic question. One spark in the shroud of night can torch hope permanently. Small enclaves cling to existence behind makeshift barriers of corrugated steel and repurposed concrete planters. Barter is the currency. Of the realm, distilled ethanol for filtered water, wild tubers for makeshift medicine. But as resources dwindle, so does trust. Rogue factions and raiders, they call themselves the Night Watchers. Their emblem hollowed crescent marks every tree and scavenged radio mast, they claim. They don't broadcast, they jam signals. Last month, I recorded a heartbeat transmission, a burst of static. Governance by council. They rotate watch shifts, share meager harvests, and enforce laws against theft and violence. Yet even their leaders confide in me off-air that fractures grow faster than algae in their underground farms. Factions form over dwindling resources. Coups are settled by fire and blade. They beg for technical guidance, how to reinforce airlocks, how to disinfect shared water. I give them blueprints in cryptic Morse, every building drawn on an etch. A sketch could be their last. Hospitals lie empty, their stored insulin and antibiotics expiring. Universities where I once lectured are museums of dust. I found a biology lab overrun by feral rats. The microscopes lie smashed, slides glued together by mold. In libraries, only the ash-covered spines of climate research volumes remain, legible. The rest disintegrated when the roof collapsed under the weight of snowy soot, despite the gloom. I break down the crisis into digestible science segments. In each broadcast, if the PMAG count spikes above 500 micrograms, you need to seal your shelter immediately. Even surgical masks let through 20% of particles. Use body heat and thermal blankets crafted from mylar. Signage to trap warmth. Home bioreactors recycle kitchen waste in sealed buckets with ureating bacteria to produce edible single-cell protein. It's foul-tasting, I know, but at 3 grams protein per gram biomass, it's better than catabolism. Harvest wind microturbines using PVC pipe sections for blades cut at a 45 angle, secure to a 12 VDC motor in reverse. Each tip serves as a lifeline, but every lifeline carries risk. If I miscalculate dwell time for acid rain decontamination, someone might ingest fatal lead loads. If I oversell bioreactor viability, I could incite colonization in toxic zones. Science in this world is not abstract. It kills or saves. Outside the shelter, the superstorms are colliding. I hear them like freight trains barreling across miles of desolation. Pressure drops wrap the valleys in sonic booms, snapping power. I count seconds between droplets to estimate pH levels. A drop every 2 seconds equates to roughly pH 3.5 enough to corrode soft. Metal in weeks. Inside, I track heart rates. My own creeps above 110 BPM when I pedal harder for power. I broadcast elevate legs for 10 minutes every hour to aid venous return. Prevent deep vein thrombosis in cold environments. I list caloric expenditure, 200 kcal per 15 minutes of pedaling at moderate resistance. If you don't replace that energy immediately, muscle wasting accelerates. Even the youngest bodies struggle. I've glimpsed children with bowed legs from malnutrition, bellies swollen. With water retention, I know the cognitive delays stunting their brains. I've measured it in EIGs borrowed from a looted medical clinic. We're raising a generation that may never learn reading or abstract thought. We're hurtling toward a tipping point when human bodies can no longer generate enough heat to survive a single 12-hour dark cycle on rations. When the last underground fungus farm collapses under mold blight, when the chemical toxins in our only water source coalesce into a lethal brew, I refuse to let numbers become fatalistic wallpaper. I plant seeds of agency in every bulletin. Jury-rig your own air scrubbers with calcium hydroxide from broken building cement. Mix borax with urine to create primitive antifreeze for your piping. Harvest phycocyanin from blue-green algae for vitamin supplements. Even if only 1 in 100 listeners acts on these instructions and survives, that's one more. Signal in the dark. It's a foothold. But as the storms intensify, the storms of ash, the cold fronts, the acid rains, and the human savagery swirling around every dwindling resource, I feel time slipping away. My generator's bearings will seize. My cistern will finally run dry, and my broadcast coil will snap. When that happens, the only record of this ulterior catastrophe will be echoes in empty tunnels. So I broadcast. I share data. I pedal until my legs burn. I speak into the void, knowing that one day even, if it's a day after my death, someone might hear these frequencies, decode the science, and perhaps build something new from the wreckage. Because despite the accelerating crisis, each day being harder than the last. The one thing I cannot do is surrender to despair. I cannot let the darkness win our will to survive, not while a single watt of power remains in these batteries, not while a single listener still turns the dial, not while the human spirit, fragile as it may be, still flickers against the night. You're listening to the radio during an eternal nightfall every morning, if you can call it that. Pedal furiously to charge the battery, praying the generator doesn't spit its last spark. Yesterday, it hummed, weaker than ever. By the time I finished broadcasting, the voltage gauge dipped below 10 V. The dim hum of the transmitter flickered, and I spent the afternoon hunched over wires, patching frayed insulation with layers of duct tape and the plastic backing of old maps. When I pressed the pedal again, the lights blinked. That blink felt like a victory, but victory is fleeting. Here my cistern has shrunk to less than 150 L at half a liter per day. That's barely 5 months of water, assuming no more leaks. Rainfall, once sporadic, has become so acidic it eats. Through steel tanks, I watched droplets corrode a galvanized roof beam in minutes. My tarp-covered patches last days before I must reseal with sealant stolen from an abandoned chemical plant. Every patch weakens, every patch fails. Food is rarer still. The lichen cultivation I started in Darkness Farms yields only a fraction of last season's biomass. Fungal blight swept through half my trays. I had to burn them, inhaling acrid spores that still tickle my lungs. The protein bars trade caravan now demands 2 bars for every 1 ration trader's leverage in a world with no regulators. I refused and walked away empty-handed. Walking away means hunger. Hunger means hallucinations. Last night, I dreamt the soil itself was crying, tiny rivulets running down cracked earth, whispering for relief. I woke, gasping, clutching my stomach. Then I remembered the dream had no warmth, no hope, ... they call themselves the Night Watchers. I've heard their boots on broken asphalt, felt their glare from the shadows. They patrol by infrared goggles that pierce any darkness we hide behind. When they came, the static in my headset shifted, a low frequency hum, then a jab of interference that slammed the broadcast off-air. I fumbled for my pedal lights, but they outnumbered me-5 silhouettes against my single lamp. I heard them talk in clipped voices. Get the water, burn the rest, signal 3 minutes only. They didn't kill me. They couldn't. Spare the time. They gutted my pantry 2 weeks worth of lichen and half my ethanol stash. Before they left, they punched a hole in the cistern piping, watched the water spurt into the dirt, and vanished like ghosts. The only trace was a single boot print in mud, stamped with a crescent emblem. I patched the pipe by hand-numb fingers. Threads stripped, but each twist of the wrench reminded me there is no safe spot on this earth, not even here, in what used to be a basement shelter. The Night Watchers proved it. Between the raids and the decay, a glimmer of rumor surfaced a beacon in the unending black. It came through a scratchy Morse code transmission 1 week ago. A8 Pine Ridge. Safe zone, fresh water, solar arrays. Repeat Pine Ridge. That's all. A handful of coordinates. A place name. Pine Ridge. I cross-referenced it with my last known map. Sits in the Black Hills, South Dakota. Forested, hilly country. Once a refuge for tourists. Now rumored to have surviving springs, unaffected by acid rain. A community rebuilt on solar. Panels salvaged from a decommissioned satellite farm. It sounded too good to be true. More likely a trap or a hoax spun by desperate minds. Yet my heart lurched at the thought. Fresh water, solar arrays, the promise of light. I scrapped together. A reply. Raven Cross Radio Station 828. Need details. Pine Ridge reply. I left the transmitter on that frequency for 3 nights. No answer. Static. Then 2 nights ago a garbled affirmative pulse. Not enough to decode. Anything more but enough to seed hope. Hope is dangerous. It drives you into the cold, unprepared, blind to the holes in your gear. But without it, you're already dead. I decided I have to investigate Pine Ridge. If the rumor is real, it could be the lifeline we need. If it's a trap, I'll at least know before anyone else falls into it. I assembled a kit, 5 liters in hardened PVC containers, 10 high-calorie bars scavenged from an abandoned rations depot, plus 2 cans of synthetic protein gruel, 1 liter of ethanol in a steel flask, enough for 2 emergency fires, a hand-crank lead lamp, 2 flares, a collapsible shovel, a pocket spectrometer, and my field kit, a sharpened bayonet salvaged from a museum display, weighted for throwing or stabbing. I hid the rest generator, filters, lichen Traysby, hind false walls. If night watchers returned, they'd find nothing. Then, before first light, I slipped into the gutted streets. Traveling in darkness is disorienting. No moon to gauge direction. I relied on a compass, once a relic, from my research kit, but the needle wavered erratically under shifting electromagnetic fields left by submerged power stations. I climbed onto rooftops, scanned the horizon for any faint glow. The acid rain had washed away most landmarks. The interstate signposts were gone. I navigated by the high-voltage pylons that survived the flood skeletons stretching toward the hills. Each step crunched glass and corroded metal underfoot. The temperature hovered at minus 18 degrees Celsius. My breath crystallized on my jacket's collar. I rationed movements, paused to warm my hands and pockets, and tested water crystals for toxins. At midday, if that word still applied, the wind dropped. I heard the distant howl of wolves, though without the sun to warm the tundra. Most wildlife had vanished or mutated into scavenger packs. I tightened my boots' gaiters against frost transfer, drilling a small ice axe into the side of a collapsed overpass to prevent slipping. Every innovation I taught on air carried me here. Every error I'd warned against kept me alive. On nights 2, I encountered the first survivors I'd seen in weeks alone. Man crouched behind a crumbled wall, head bowed. His ragged parka hung off one shoulder, a makeshift hood hiding bruised cheeks. I raised my hands to show no weapon drawn, and he mirrored me. We both held our breaths, listening for raiders. After a dozen seconds, he whispered, "Raven." I flinched. He'd heard my broadcasts. He must have triangulated my signal multiple times to pinpoint this route. "You're from Pine Ridge?" I asked, voice low. He nodded. "Name's Emery. I was scouting for our group. We need help filters. Broke. Crops failing. You're our only hope to calibrate the spectrometer." His voice cracked like thin ice. "We need you." I studied him. His hands trembled from cold and shock. His backpack was patched with duct tape, held together by hope. I thought of my own dwindling kits, the risk of travel, but I nodded. Lead on. But if this is a trap, it's not, he said. His glance was steady, I promise. Walking. Alongside Emery, every shadow seemed a threat. Twisted rebar, fallen slabs, pools of oily water, reflecting no light. He pointed to a set of carved Markerzan arrow, spray-painted on concrete. I recognized the crescent symbol of the Night Watchers, defaced and crossed out in red. We pushed them back, he said. Pine Ridge stands. I swallowed. Could I trust him? A lifetime of data had taught me skepticism, that uncertainty breeds fatal mistakes. But without trust, we perish alone. I chose to believe. Our route skirted a broken dam, where a stagnant reservoir glistened with a sheen of toxins. Emery braved a plank to check its depth. He fell through up to his waist, arms shaking. I hauled him out, wrapped him in my jacket. No frostbite, said. I patched his soaked pants with spare liner strips. The risk that water was contaminated by heavy metals, but the reservoir wasn't meant for drinking. I had no intention of guzzling it. It was just a landmark on the map. Night. We heard Ingenza low, diesel thrum. Emery froze. I pressed my back against a crumbling wall, checking my bayonet. In the dim fog, 2 trucks rolled by, headlights off, silhouettes of men atop the beds, rifles trained, raiders, the Night Watchers. They passed within 20 meters, oblivious to our presence, then turned off toward the valley. I exhaled so hard the breath froze inside my mask. Emery whispered, "Damn lucky." "Luck runs out," I replied. We move now. At Dongraffel, Donai crested a hill. Below lay Pine Ridge Valley, trees still standing, dark pines crowned, with frost, winding spring-fed creek, glowing pale turquoise against the black earth. On its banks stood solar arrays, their panels angled upward, seeds of light in the gloom. I watched technicians 4 of them haul oxygen tanks and scrounge beneath panel booms. Emery sprinted ahead. I lingered, clutching the spectrometer. Heart-hammering dot. Could this be real? I switched on the spectrometers. It sputtered to life, scanned the water's surface, pH 6.8, trace heavy metals below danger thresholds, conductivity within safe limits. My jaw slackened. Genuine fresh water. At that moment, 3 of the technicians looked up. I raised my fist, then pointed at the sky, pantomiming dark, then water. They understood. Their relief was palpable. I saw tears freeze on one woman's cheek. She pushed through the snow, arms wide, as if embracing something centuries dead. I stripped off my balaclava, letting the cold cut my cheeks. "Raven Cross," I said into the frigid wind. "Climatologist, broadcast survivor." They cheered. Softly no raider roars here, only human voices rising above the hush. As I stood there, breathing in unpoisoned air, I felt every pang of this journey, the hunger, the raider theft, the near misses. I thought of the listeners still tuned in, waiting for proof that survival was possible. I thought of those I left behind, the man in Wisconsin enclave whose generator sputtered last winter, the woman in Quebec reading poetry to empty airwaves. Would they hear this broadcast? Could they navigate here? A chill of doubt crept in. Would I be damned if I invited hordes of desperate souls into this valley? Could Pine Ridge sustain more mouths? Or would I become the architect of its downfall? But then the woman technician handed me a steaming mug of algae broth gritty, foul, but life nonetheless. she said. We have enough if we share, but we can't hold it ourselves. We need your network, your voice. I looked at the solar panels catching the dull dawn glow and felt the weight of possibility. Even in this eternal night, pockets of light could exist. We might piece together a fragile mosaic of hope. My leg trembled from weeks of cold. My eyes stung from dust and frost. My soul quaked with the burden of choice. But I reached into my pack and pulled out the spare ration bars. I offered them round. I'll stay, I said, voice cracking. If you'll let me broadcast from here, teach others how to get through the dark, and explain the science of your springs and your panels, we'll seed more sanctuaries' little beacons, one at a time. They nodded. Emery smiled, though his lips were blue. Let's rebuild, Raven, one broadcast at a time. In that moment, the air felt less like a tune and more like breath. The tension I carried for weeks unraveled, just enough for a single spark of hope to flare. And in the rising action of this endless night, something shifted from mere survival to the beginnings of a plan. The valley of Pine Ridge could be the first of many safe havens if we could keep them secret, keep them protected, and, above all, keep peddling Dot, because in this world without sun, the brightest light we have is each other's will to press on. And here, on the ridge's edge, our will felt a little stronger than it had in years, a little louder than the static, a little more alive than the eternal night, I heard. The warning on the early morning transmission, a low-frequency rumble that didn't belong to thunder or wind. Pine Ridge's Geiger counter array had picked up a surge of charged particles, likely from an underground fissure near the old volcanic scene. The technicians scrambled across frost-cracked earth, flipping switches and scribbling notes on clipboards. Behind them, the solar panels hummed in eerie harmony, feeding data into our makeshift network. I stood at the command tent's entrance, cupping a metal mug of algae broth. My heart hammered in time with the Geiger clicks. What does it mean? I asked Mara, our lead engineer, her goggles fogged with frost. She shook her head, voice low. Could be a gas, leak methane, or sulfur dioxide. Might corrode the panels, poison the springs. We need to test the water downstream immediately. A hush fell over the crew. The springs were our lifeline. Without them, Pine Ridge would wither. In nights colder than memory, Dot. I grabbed my field kit and followed Mara down the slope. Snow crunched beneath our boots, each step sending plumes of frozen mist into the gray sky. Halfway to the creek, the wind shifted an acrid stench mixed with ozone. My spectrometer chimed. So, at 5,000 ppb, danger zone. Back to the ridge, Mara ordered. Her voice cracked as she paused, scanning the horizon. And Ravenseal, your mask. We may only have minutes before the plume reaches us. I tightened my balaclava over my face, clipped on a charcoal scrub filter salvaged from hospital vents. The others did the same, moving in practiced urgency. But in that moment, I felt the weight of everything we'd built, the cistern, the solar, farm, the radio station. All of it depended on staying alive, on keeping hope alive. We raced back uphill, lungs burning with filtered air. Behind us, a low roar grew, like a freight train barreling toward a cliff. Mara shouted into her comm. All hands evacuate to shelter. Seal doors, initiate emergency flush of water lines, Inside the reinforced barn-turned-laboratory, we hurled sandbags against hatches, kicked barrels into place, clicked shut seal, bolts. The massive doors groaned as the toxic plume hit a wall of belching sulfur gas that clung to the air, hung like an invisible oil slick. We activated the ventilation system's reverse flow, sucking outside air through charcoal filters, bleeding it upward and away. I watched the Geiger counter again. The panel array's radiation readings spiked as the gas corroded wiring, shorting. Circuits, sparks, flew near the control console. Panic clawed at my throat. If the panels failed, the pumps would stop. The cistern would run dry. The green flicker of data feeds would go dark. Along with our radios, in that heartbeat, I realized. The true cost, beyond survival, we risked losing the very promise of sanctuary. Pine Ridge wasn't just a refuge, it was a symbol, a blueprint for pockets of life in the dark. If we lost it, we lost the fragile roadmap out of this endless night. Mara's voice cut through the chaos. Raven, get to the water tanks. We need to isolate them before contamination. A deafening crack bellowed as the gas pushed airlocks past their safety margins. One of the reinforced windows shattered, showering glass across the floor. The technicians scrambled to block it with welded shutters. I sprinted down the corridor, lab coat trailing, feet slick on scattered shards, at the water tanks. A spiderweb of pipes snaked across the wall, valves painted in fading red and blue. I knew each valve by touch. My fingers danced, blue, red, green. Then I heard the roar swell behind me and felt heat press against the metal hull. The valves resisted cold, seized by rust and the weight of panic. Raven, Mara's shout echoed down the hallway. You need heat. Use the flare. I yanked a red flare from its bracket, struck it against the rough concrete. A gout of hot phosphorus flared to life in my gloved hand. I held it under the valve wheel, hissing steam as frozen grime vaporized. The wheel turned with a metallic groan. I sealed the lines first to the creek intake, then to the distribution pump. At last, only the enclosed reserve remained. My lungs burned. My heart felt a hammering tattoo in my chest. I dropped the spent flare, the phosphorus dying in a puff of smoke. As I staggered back toward the lab door, the electrical hum above steadied the remaining panels, had rerouted power through an emergency bypass. Lights flickered on. The ventilation roared louder, expelling the remaining gas. Inside, Mara and the team worked over the control console, resetting breakers, rerouting sensors. I leaned against the cold wall, hand pressed to my chest, trying to catch breath through the scrub filter. Mara turned, eyes wide. We're holding powers at 40%. Waters isolated, but we've lost to array sectors. Forecast calls for more seismic activity in 24 hours. We need to decide. Do we repair under threat or evacuate completely? Silence fell. Diagnostics blinked on the monitors. One panel's irradiance sensor read 0. The others hovered just above critical thresholds. Below, the map of Pine Ridge glowed with colored arcs, representing contamination plumes, frost zones, radar patrols. I remembered the man I encountered on my journey, the lone survivor who led me here. Emery. His faith in this place had been absolute, but tonight that faith would be tested. If we stayed, the risk was extinction. If we left, we scattered hope into the void, perhaps burying it deeper in the dark. I felt the weight of the microphone stand behind me, our link to the world. Broadcast. Tell them what's happening. Offer evacuation coordinates to other enclaves. But we stay just long enough to stabilize the panels and water. Then we'll lead a convoy. Pine Ridge will become ground zero for replication, not just a fortress. That means sacrifice. We'll lose people, maybe, I replied. But leaving now is consent to die in place. Around us, technicians whispered prayers as they keyed in messages, voices trembling. Then I strapped the backup mic to my chest and retuned the transmitter. The familiar static crackled, then cleared. "This is Ravencross, Pine Ridge Station," I began, voice echoing in the reinforced barn. "To every listener out there, tonight we face more than darkness. We face poison in the air, cracks in the ground, and the weight of our own fears. But we will not surrender. We will not stay buried. We will carry this light further than we ever dared imagine." Hands moved behind my Mara, gesturing the data readouts. The panel technicians reboot arrays in real time. Every second of my broadcast was tethered to the rhythm of footsteps in the corridors and the whir of turbines outside. As I spoke the final lines, a tremor shuddered through the building. Lights flickered. The ventilation coughed. A distant crash part of the old silo roof collapsing under seismic strain. I paused. My voice wavered. For a moment, the only sound was the dash of Geiger clicks against my chest microphone. The team stared at the console. Outside, the gas plume had dissipated, but the air remained thick with tension. Mara reached over and squeezed my arm. From shelter in place to caravan of hope, I thought of those starving enclaves, the lonely broadcasters, the children who had never known sunrise. I thought of my sister, of my partner, of the life I once planned. Tonight, all of it coalesced into this choice to push forward, not just for survival, but for the spark of tomorrow in the aftermath of the crisis. As the tremor faded and the battered panels hummed back to life, I felt something rare stir. Within me, the fierce, unyielding certainty that even in an eternal night, we can choose to stand in that choice more than any sunrise could change everything. The tremor faded, but its echo lingered in our bones. When I stepped outside the reinforced barn, the world felt both unchanged and irrevocably different. The sulfur plume had dispersed, leaving a brittle hush over the valley. The solar arrays, half repaired, half still smoking, hummed mournfully in the dawnless air. The spring's weed, isolated, still ran clear, but the creek bed beyond our berms held the faint, oily sheen of yesterday's crisis dot over the next week. We executed the plan, born in the climax, a caravan of 15 vehicles, armored trucks, modified, SUVs, even a salvaged school bus retrofitted with solar panels rolled out from Pine Ridge. Each carried water jugs stamped with our new filtration logo, and crates of instruction manuals handwritten and laminated with melted, "If you're hearing this, you're not alone. Help is coming." The drivers honked horns in reply, a chorus of mechanical hope that vibrated through the valley. Emery, stoic through it all, stood beside me and caught my gaze. His eyes were the same mix of exhaustion and fierce determination I saw the first night I arrived. By the end of the second day's journey, we reached the outskirts of the Wisconsin enclave I once traded with. Their ramshackle walls sagged under the weight of acid rain runoff. Their lichened farms lay rotting in the frost. When they saw our convoy fresh water barrels, antenna masts, solar panels, they wept. Children ran barefoot toward the trucks, jackets too thin for the cold, faces gaunt with hunger. I handed over water and led them in jury-rigging a pedal solar hybrid generator. Within hours, the enclave's lights flickered on, a small beacon in the dark. I watched the faces, some filled with disbelief, some with gratitude so raw it hurt. A woman approached me, tear tracks frozen on her cheeks. "I thought we were gone," she whispered. "We thought this was the end." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "It isn't," I said, voice catching. "Not yet. But hope always exacts a price." That night, raiders struck the rear of our convoy. Under cover of darkness, they slashed tire treads and looted to truck stealing 3 days, worth of fuel and a pallet of water jugs bound for another enclave. They vanished as quickly as they came, leaving only punctured tanks and a steel-toed boot print stamped in mud. In the morning, Emery knelt over the wreckage, face stormy. "They knew what we were carrying," he said. "Hope itself." I didn't have an answer. We fortified our tactics, night watches, doubled, convoy routes randomized, vents on our doors sealed tighter. I recorded bulletins on ambush avoidance and broadcast them far and wide. Still, each broadcast felt like striking a match in the wind-a-bright flare that could draw desperate eyes for miles. Even as we pressed on, the losses shadowed every mile. We buried one driver, Clara, in the scorched earth beside the highway. She was the first to siphon spare fuel from her own tank to push a crippled vehicle to safety. A stray bullet had found her as she stepped from the cab. We laid her in a shallow trench marked by a driftwood cross and left a solar lantern flickering above her grave. At night, it glows small, flickering promise that some part of her light survives. The memory of Clara's sacrifice weighs on me every broadcast. I share her story not to glorify death, but to remind listeners that choice comes with cost. We choose to carry water, build generators, and risk our lives for strangers because the alternative is silence. And silence here is the end. On the fourth morning, as the convoy rolled through what used to be Madison, Wisconsin, I found a moment of quiet on the back of an armored flatbed. The wind was still an almost unheard of command. The creeping fog revealed the empty shell of the Capitol building, its dome half collapsed. I took out my field kit, tested a water sample from a roadside puddle pH 4.2, heavy metals off the charts, and scribbled the data in my log. I thought of myself a year ago, a climatologist crunching numbers in sterile labs. Far from this nightmare, I thought of the sister I never saved, the partner I never retrieved. I felt grief, sharp as ice butt, also something else, a curious ember of pride. We, ragtag survivors, armed with sheer will, had turned the tide, however slightly. I closed my eyes and let the half-breath of that ember glow. The world remains a shattered mosaic, flooded cities, poisoned forests, endless nightbutt amidst the ruin. Yet each one taught me that even fractured hope can patch the cracks in human hearts. When the convoy halted at a former Exto University campus, now a freshwater spring guarded by buckled palm trees grown in greenhouse's eye broadcast. The final instructions: plant your seeds under the UV lamps. Insulate your greenhouses with broken textbooks. Every seed is a future sunrise. The campus, courtyard, lit by flickering LEDs, seemed to lean in and listen. I saw children planting tubers in half-buried planters, elders tightening solar connectors, students scrawling chalk diagrams on sidewalk slabs. They were building tomorrow in 4 degrees Celsius darkness. Despite the cataclysm, nature sometimes mimics our resilience. I've spotted pockets of bioluminescent algae glowing in abandoned waterways mutations that tolerate perpetual night. In one flooded subway tunnel outside Chicago, mushrooms sprout phosphorescent caps, feeding on the damp detritus, their fragile wonders reminding me life adapts, even in the unlikeliest niches. Here at the campus spring, I sampled the water again, pH 7.1, nitrates within human-safe levels, trace minerals enough to spark algae cultures. Nearby greenhouses, once shuttered, now sprout wheat shoots under LED arrays. A fleeting memory, but enough to fuel another day of survival. Now, weeks after the climax, I sit before the transmitter at this new outpost still Raven Cross, still pedaling against the dark, but I am not alone. Over a dozen enclaves have reported building water cisterns and solar arrays. Every broadcast I send is filled with coordinates and cautions. Beware raiders on Route 12. I've shed vestiges of my former life, the pristine lab coat replaced by patched field gear, the academic jargon swapped for survival prose. Yet in its place grew something more profound, an unbreakable tether to humanity. I understand now that data isn't just numbers on a page. It's the lifeblood of communities clinging to existence. I've also carried scars physical and emotional that no ration can heal. My left knee clicks from a fall through thin ice. My right ear still rings from the gas blast in Pine Ridge. At night, I wake, haunted by Clara's final breath, the glow of her lantern, and the distant drone of raider engines. Some mornings, I pedal slower, my heart heavy with doubt. But every time I hear voices crackle over the airwaves, Raven, we need your help here, I steel myself. The choice remains the same. Surrender to despair or pedal onward. Tonight, I choose to pedal as the world breathes in its eternal night. The caravan I helped launch steers toward the horizon's faint promise of sanctuary. Behind us, lights burn in abandoned towns reclaimed by hope. Ahead, the path darkens. Under storm clouds and human threats, the cycle of crisis continues. Exhaustion and inspiration, loss and repair, despair and hope. I don't know if we will ever see the sun again. I don't know if the next enclave will make it, or if the storms will finally overwhelm our ragged defenses. But I do know this. In the aftermath of our turning point, we proved one essential truth: life, even in a world without light, finds a way to flicker. And as long as that flicker remains, I will keep pedaling, keep broadcasting, and keep believing that somewhere beyond the next ridge or the next ruined highway, a dawn still waits, however faint, ready to rise on a world rebuilt by the determined and unbowed. The convoy has moved on, headlights bobbing like fireflies across the ruined highways, carrying our fragile network of sanctuaries deeper into the dark behind me. The abandoned campus springs hum quietly, lamps flicker against cold glass, young shoots of wheat stirring in hydroponic troughs. Ahead lies uncertainty. Storm forecasts call for acid rainfall tomorrow, and reports of night watcher patrols swirl in the static. I sit before the transmitter one last time tonight. The soft pedal hum beneath my legs, the only reminder that life demands motion, even when the world seems frozen. My field kit lies open beside me, maps marked with tight circles, sample vials half full, spare filters stacked like hopeful prayers. I thumbed the charts and realized they're less data points now, and more signposts on a path we keep carving, step by agonizing step. Hope here is fragile. We found springs untouched by corrosion, but they collapse under seismic tremors. We built solar arrays, but acid drops eat panels like acid on steel. We rallied a convoy, but raiders pick off our tail end when we rest. Every small victory comes, tethered to a fresh crisis. Yet, if you listen closely, you can hear it, the soft echo of humanity refusing to bow. In the days since the Pine Ridge fissure, the valley showed signs of renewal. Phosphorus-loving moss sprouted along the creek banks. Bioluminescent mushrooms winked in subterranean tunnels. I collected spores in petri dishes, proof that life adapts even when the sky is strangled. I distributed spores to enclaves through hidden drops beneath a rusted bridge, inside hollowed-out lichen blocks, stashed in waterproof film canisters. Each spore is a promise that, one day, far from now, this world might pulse with green again. But even as I nurtured those spores, I weighed the cost. Each drop-off risked exposure. Each broadcast about them risked raider interference. Each choice might lead someone into the maw of danger. I wrestled with this in the long watch's legs, aching, lungs rasping under the scrub filter, heart a metronome of dread and resolve. In those moments, I returned to memories of a life before the night, the warmth of sunlight on an early spring morning, the scent of pine after rain, my sister's laughter drifting through our family cabin, my partner's music echoing in a sunlit living room. Those memories felt like contraband in this world's luxuries that cut deeper than hunger. But they also reminded me what we fight to reclaim tonight. I clasp the microphone and speak not as a scientist dissecting data, but as a survivor sharing a flicker of humanity. To everyone still tuning in, I know you're tired. I know you've lost more than you can bear. But listen, there is life in this dark. We found springs. We sparked greenhouses. We crossed hostile lands to deliver a handful of hope. It's not enough to end the night, but it's enough to light a path. I pause, letting the silence fill the speakers. Somewhere in the blackness, someone breathes in rhythm with mine. I can almost hear it on the line. We will not see the sun again in our lifetimes, perhaps never. But that does not mean we surrender. We adapt, we grow, we share what we learn. Every water cistern built, every seed planted, every petal turned is a testament that the human spirit endures. I rise and step into the cold corridor, boots clicking against metal grates. Snowdrifts whisper against sealed doors. The valley lamps cast long shadows of twisted steel and budding green. I watch the hydroponic troughs, gluttony emerald lines, tracing tomorrow's promise. Outside, I know the storm is coming. The acid rain will batter greenhouses. The wind will howl with desperation. But tonight, I let myself hope. I let myself believe that one greenhouse can seed another, that one convoy can become many, that every broadcast can fan the ember of resistance, because hope however frail, sustains us. It's the quiet insistence to plant a seed in frozen ground. It's the courage to teach someone else to build a filter rather than hoard it. It's the decision to pedal for an extra minute so your voice reaches one more pair of ears. I look at the last ration bar on my table. Its half-eat no longer a mere calorie count, but a symbol of survival. Tomorrow I will share it with a traveler who finds our gates. He'll earn that share with a schematic for a better heat exchanger or a sample of mutated algae that glows brighter in the dark. We'll trade knowledge and food and stories. Together, we'll carry this fragile spark forward. My final message crackles through the static. Stay alive, stay human, share what you have, teach what you learn, protect each other, even when the world seems unbearably cruel. The night is eternal, but so is our will to endure. This is Ravencross, signing off from Pine Ridge Station. Keep turning the petals, keep planting the spores, and remember where one light flickers, another can follow. I tap the mic and let the static reclaim the frequency. The pedal slows as I step away, but the glow from the lamps behind me remains steady, defiant, hopeful. In this world without sunrise, the morning is in our hands. It is every small act of courage, every shared ration, every broadcast that reaches the next outpost. The night may never end, but as long as we breathe and remember each other, the story continues, and that, perhaps, is enough.